one of the biggest problems in talent acquisition, especially when using outside recruiting firms. I can find somebody that can read a P&L. I can figure out somebody that can do zero-based budgeting. But are they going to jam with the chief strategy officer and the chief revenue officer?
Don't interview them for the job you want them to do today. Interview them for the job you want 5 years from now, especially when we work with founders and CEOs of growth companies who are seeing growth.
Do you mind giving everybody, here is the big situation of why that happens? And then let's dive eventually into what are the resolutions? How do you solve for this? Welcome to Outsource to Profits. I have a fantastic guest. Andy, do you mind telling the team, what do you do? Who do you help? Let's talk about the topic of the day.
Sure. Hi, my name is Andy Rhodes. I'm the co-founder and CEO of High Altitude Recruiting. We are a retained executive search firm that partners with C-level executives and HR teams to hire director level and above talent.
So this is fantastic. As we're going to be diving into the culture piece of this, the culture fit. Let me tell you a quick story. My first agency was called Sales for Life, but it was actually a merger of two agencies. I had a company, Shanks Group, and there was this company called Sales for Life. Turns out we were sharing a customer, and that was called Granger. So I was in a meeting, and I'd be enabling. So my expertise was enabling sales professionals become better. Now, this is long before I helped pioneer social selling. This was in and around inside sales, or what's called Sales 2.0. Long of the short is I was really frustrated. I would talk to the head of sales there. His name was Wally. I say, Wally, the person that's recruiting the talent coming in, I have no input on this. So you're giving me B and C players, and then you're asking me to turn them into gold. And he laughed because he's like, it's crazy because I was just in another meeting with the recruiting company we use, and they keep saying, we keep sending you talent, but you're not enabling them enough. So the talent's burning out after 3 months. Mm-hmm. And he laughed and he said, I'm going to bring you guys out for lunch. I want you to talk together. And it turns out that we came together. It was a recruiting agency and a sales consulting company came together. And at that same time, we kind of invented this thing called social selling. Long of the short is you can't do one without the other. You and I were talking offline about one of the biggest problems in talent acquisition, especially when using outside recruiting firms, is I can find people that are skill-based. We were talking about finance. I can find somebody that can read a P&L. I could figure out somebody that can do zero-based budgeting. But are they going to jam with the chief strategy officer and the chief revenue officer? Do you mind giving everybody, here is the big situation of why that happens? And then let's dive eventually into what are the resolutions? How do you solve for this?
Yeah. So when we launch a search, like every recruiting agency, you do an intake call, right? And you're learning, how do we draft the job description? What are you looking for? And oftentimes at most companies, that's head HR or a director of HR who's leading that initiative. And very rarely do we have the hiring manager on the call. So the first thing we do, Jamie, is we say, we need every party that's part of this hiring team to be on this call so we're all on the same page. And we find that when we do our intake call, we say, okay, give us 2 weeks. We're going to go out and find a slate of candidates. We practice by saying, okay, we're going to find 5 profiles, send them to you and the executive team, the hiring team. We want everyone to review them. We want to get notes from everyone to make sure we're all on the same page. And then every week we do a weekly cadence call to ensure that we are, performing and getting the right candidates through the door. We will fire clients if the hiring team isn't on that. We need every possible person there so everyone's on the same page. To your point, you can't have 2 outside sources that don't communicate with one another. So oftentimes I have to say to the head of HR, hey, I know the CFO is busy, but the 30 minutes they're going to spend on this call is going to drop weeks of the search. Because inevitably what will happen is the HR person will say, I love these 3 candidates. Let's put them in front of the CFO. And the CFO goes, they're missing X, Y, or Z. Well, I could have known that 6 weeks ago had they been on one of the original calls. And we talked about what's important to them. What gaps are they seeing in their team? And so for us, when we coach and consult with our clients, it's having everyone who is part of the hiring team on the initial call and trying to keep them on all of the calls throughout the cadence before we get to final round of interviews, because it just keeps the pages clear, concise, and everyone is on that same page.
Yeah, and I can imagine that there are so many executives you deal with that try to become, especially the more downstream the role that they're hiring, they try to feel like, we'll use the CFO, then corporate controller, then you have maybe like almost like that bookkeeping function, payroll, then inside there's these other treasurer and other finance
Mhm.
roles. The more downstream that it gets, the more that they're like, you know what, I might make that final decision at the end. And the candidate's been through all these interviews, and then the CFO is almost frustrated by this time. It's been like 2 months through this process, and all of a sudden they say, "You know what? Just hire them," or they'll half-ass it through the process, and then all of a sudden the churn rate of that candidate, the percentage chance that candidate churns because they have a misalignment with their leader. I know you're doing executive search, but
Mhm.
like that whole miscommunication process must happen in all forms of recruitment. Bringing it back to executive recruitment, what is the downstream effects if for whatever reason you end up getting great candidates and they make it through the front end journey, but people like the chief executive officer stop caring or missing some of these kind of important cues pre-talent acquisition? What are you seeing as the ramifications on the back end to the company once that talent comes in the door?
A lot of the times it's a massive culture hit, right? Because when you have a CEO who's hiring for a position that's kind of too busy to be on all the calls, they're seeing an individual who can do the role, right? Like, let's talk about like a VP of finance. That if that person's got the experience and the exposure, great. But the CEO, if they don't interview them until they're not seeing the cultural fit, right? And so that has like a massive effect. It's top down leadership. We always say to our executive teams and our C-level suite, hey, don't interview them for the job you want them to do today. Interview them for the job you want 5 years from now, especially when we work with founders and CEOs of companies who are seeing growth. You can hire someone to do the job today, but you need to interview them. Can they do the job 5 years from now? Because there's going to be a point in that maybe 1 or 2 year cycle, first 1 or 2 years of their tenure with your organization, that they may hit a wall.
Yeah.
And I often coach CEOs, if you're not active in this interview process and you don't catch that early, you're rehiring this person in 2 years, because you're going to find that they just don't scale with you. And so that's where being present and making sure that, hey, we're interviewing for culture and we're interviewing for growth. Those are the two biggest things that we see where CEOs, C-level suite fall flat on their face, because they're just not thinking about those, because they're not active in the search, right?
Can you deploy some wisdom bombs from your experience of an executive recruiting? If I'm the CEO or founder of the business,
Mm-hmm.
what can you arm me as my sniff test for those that will have cultural alignment and growth alignment? What can I be asking, looking for, not asking them to ask me questions? Like, what would you do?
Yeah, this is one of the hardest. Cultural interviews is one of the hardest things, because there's no assessment, in my opinion, that I've worked with that can really identify. So we always tell people, have you heard of like the airport lounge test? You have a layover, 2 hours. Could you have a beer with this individual
I've
and
heard
not?
it as the beer test.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You don't want to wring their neck. So we always tell people, like, take them out for dinner a couple times and get to know them on a personal level, right? Obviously you're in an interview, so you have to be very like present about what questions you ask. But how do you react to them as a human being and as a person, right? A lot of the times for C-level executives, we say to our clients, fly out the wife or the spouse of the individual and bring them in on the interview as well. Take them out for dinner, because then you're going to get a sense of who they are as a person and as an individual. And then that way, when you go into the trenches with them, that you're going to be able to survive it. And that's been one of the biggest tests. The second test that we do, and we have organizations practice this quite a bit, is have multiple leaders within the organization do that with the individual, right? Get them alone one-on-one and just talk about, not tell me about a time when, but like, we've just had this issue. Like, how would you handle it? And I often coach my candidates, instead of a cover letter, in addition to a resume, I say, hey, take your 3 career home runs and let's put them in paragraph form: star, situation, task, action, result. And let's put that in front of the C-level suite, 2 to 3 paragraphs, whet their palate, let them know what you've done, what you're most proud of. Because that opens a whole host of conversation of, hey, we just had this issue actually arise on the shop floor or whatever it is. And you're now having a more engaging conversation. But honestly, the culture, it's just, you have to get to know the person. And that goes back to being present on the beginning of the calls, right? Because a good recruiter is going to tell you during the interview process, I really get a sense that this person is going to be a good culture fit. I get a good sense that they're going to work really well with Jamie. And here's why: because I've picked up on these strengths of Jamie's. I've also picked up on these weaknesses. And most CEOs don't want to hear what they're weak at, but hey, this candidate, that's their strength. And most CEOs in the back of their brain is going to be like, that's fantastic, because I need someone who can pick up that slack.
Fantastic. Any other tidbits, nuggets of gold that you could give in helping the founder assess? And I love that we were reviewing the culture side, the beer test. What about on our last question, when it comes to the growth side? It's almost like, as a founder, I don't know what I don't know, and I don't even know what I need. Like, I'll give you my own business. We're a 7-figure agency. I know I need to get to 8 figures, but there's this concept. It's the who, not the how. Mm-hmm. And it's the who that's going to get you. It's not the how, because I can't even tell you what the how is yet, because I've never built an 8-figure agency. I've only built 7-figure agencies. So the question is, as the founder or some of the other people part of that hiring experience, they're trying to almost recruit talent that can do things that they haven't even anyone in the room has ever experienced before. So how do you help them in that process?
Again, it goes with a good intake call. It's identifying like what they want and how they want to get there. And honestly, it's finding the person that's done that. Quick example, one of my first ever clients was Dairy Queen, and they were looking to hire a VP of supply chain to expand their Asian footprint. I didn't know this until the time, but the number one flavor of ice cream in the world is green tea, because over 1 billion people in Asia eat it.
I would have lost 100 times out of 100 on that.
Same. I would have thought it was vanilla, right? Yeah, but it's 100%. Green tea. And I remember specifically the CEO of Dairy Queen said, do not find anyone from McDonald's. They may be the greatest fast food chain in the world, but everything is supremely automated. So no one's actually gotten their hands dirty and built something. And so I always tell people, and I always coach people, find the person that built it, and then find the person that stayed with the project for at least a year to 18 months, because they were ironing out all the kinks along the way. And so don't find the person that implemented and built and then exited, because they didn't do all the heavy lifting or the hard work on the back end. When everything went up in smoke, they weren't there. So to answer the question simply, find the person that's been there, done that, pay whatever you have to pay if you see the growth potential, and then find the person that not only has done it, but stayed with it, because their longevity is going to help you iron out all the kinks along the way.
This is fantastic. For the audience, how do they get a hold of you? And what is kind of your ideal customer that you work with, so they'll know?
Yeah, so we love working with customers that are 5 million plus in revenue, maybe have an HR team, or maybe they need to hire an HR team, but we truly work as a partner of an organization. So we don't just ship resumes to people and hope they work. We work retained. So I will partner with you and say, here's the best 3 to 5 candidates. And I love when I get the feedback, this is a really hard choice, because I know I've hit it on the head. Highaltituderecruiting.com is our website, and you can find me on LinkedIn as Andy Rhodes.
This is fantastic. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.